3 months after the Battle of Kepler's Edge, Captain Park Hyun stood in a conference room in the coalition capital. He was no longer just a captain. He wore the uniform of an admiral now, though the promotion still felt strange. Around the table sat representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The room was silent as President Kang Min-ho presented his proposal. For too long, we have assumed that standardization means strength. We have encouraged every species to abandon their unique technologies in favor of common systems. The Battle of Kepler's Edge proved this thinking was wrong. He displayed data from the battle. Every species in the room had seen the recordings. The images of one old human ship defeating a modern armada had spread across the entire galaxy. I propose we change our approach, Kang continued. Let each species contribute their unique strengths. Let humans build kinetic weapons and armor. Let the Tarlaxians contribute their sensor technology. Let the Mescari share their shield designs. Together, we are stronger than any empire. The debate lasted for hours. Some species were hesitant. Change was difficult, especially when the old ways seemed to work. But the Battle of Kepler's Edge had shaken everyone's assumptions. Eventually, the proposal passed. The Galactic Coalition would become truly diverse for the first time in its history. Far across space, in the Vorath Empire's capital, War Master Krell Vastan presented his report to the High Command. He had been promoted after Vex Morath's death. Now he stood before the Empire's rulers and told them an uncomfortable truth. We did not lose because of technology, Krell said carefully. We lost because of thinking. The humans prepared to fight enemies stronger than themselves. We prepared only to fight weaker enemies. They adapted and improvised. We followed doctrine and assumed our superiority. The High Command was silent. Admitting weakness was not the Vorath way. What do you recommend? One of the rulers finally asked. We negotiate peace with the Coalition, Krell said. Not because we fear them, but because conquering them would cost more than it is worth. The humans have shown that weaker forces can defeat stronger ones with the right tactics. Other species will learn from them. The galaxy is changing. The Vorath Empire quietly opened peace talks with the Coalition. They would never admit to fear, but they had learned respect. On Earth, Admiral Lee Suman oversaw the construction of a new fleet. The shipyards above the planet and on Titan's moon worked day and night. The new ships were unlike anything seen before. They combined human designs with modern technology. The first new vessel launched 3 months after the battle. It was named Resilient, and it carried both railguns and energy weapons. It had thick armor and energy shields. It was faster than Vorath ships and tougher than anything the Coalition had built before. 10 more ships followed. Defiant, unyielding, relentless. Each one carried a name that meant something to humanity. Each one represented a different approach to warfare. Dr. Yun Sang-woo became the director of the new Center for Comparative Military Doctrine. He studied how different species fought and how their methods could complement each other. His research was translated into 12 languages and read throughout the galaxy. We spent a century trying to make everyone the same, he wrote in his most famous paper. We confused unity with uniformity. Real strength comes from diversity of thought, not conformity of method. The crew of the Indomitable became legends. Park Hyun, now Admiral Park, commanded Earth's first assault fleet. He spent his time training new officers, teaching them the old human doctrines that everyone had forgotten. Kim Mirai became chief designer for the new ship class. She worked with engineers from multiple species, combining old human ingenuity with new resources. She was happier than she had been in decades. Choi Daeho was promoted to commander and given the first officer position on the second new ship. He was still young and eager, but now his confidence was earned rather than hoped for. Han Ji-woo received offers from every major species to teach their officers electronic warfare. She chose to stay with Earth's fleet, but taught classes to students from across the galaxy. Her lectures on network vulnerabilities became required study for all Coalition officers. Kyo Jin-woo and Nam Sora became instructors at Earth's Naval Academy. Young pilots and weapons officers learned from the two people who had survived the impossible. Park Ji-soo followed her father into the fleet. Their relationship, strained for years, slowly healed. They rarely spoke about the battle, but both understood what they had shared in those desperate hours. The original Indomitable was recovered from space and brought back to Earth. Engineers studied every system, every design choice, every aspect of its construction, but they did not return it to service. Instead, it became a museum. The ship was restored to exactly how it had been on the day of the battle. Visitors could walk through its corridors, see its bridge, understand what the crew had done. The ship's motto, carved into the bridge wall, became famous across the galaxy. Hit first, hit hard, and never stop moving. It was simple and brutal and very human. 5 years after the battle, the first class of officers trained in the new combined doctrine graduated. They came from a dozen different species. They had learned on ships that mixed technologies from multiple worlds. They represented everything the Coalition could be. Admiral Park Hyun gave the graduation speech. He stood before hundreds of young officers and looked at their eager faces. They reminded him of his crew on the Indomitable. Young, brave, ready to prove themselves. 5 years ago, he said, one old ship reminded the galaxy of an important truth. There is no single right way to fight, to build, to think. The galaxy is stronger when we embrace our differences, not when we erase them. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The Indomitable was not special because it was powerful. It was special because it was different. It represented a way of thinking that we had almost lost. Each of you comes from a different world, a different culture, a different way of seeing the universe. That diversity is your strength. The young officers listened in silence. You will face threats we cannot imagine yet. You will fight battles in ways we have not invented. But remember what that old ship taught us. Being different is not a weakness to overcome. It is a strength to celebrate. That night, Admiral Park Hyun returned to the Indomitable Museum. It was late and he was alone. He stood on the bridge where he had made the decision to charge an entire armada. The displays were dark now, frozen in time as monuments. His daughter found him there. Lieutenant Park Ji-soo stood beside her father in the quiet darkness. Do you think about it often? She asked. The battle? Every day, Hyun admitted. We could have died so many times. We should have died. But we didn't, Ji-soo said. And because we didn't, everything changed. They stood together looking at the stars through the view screen. Somewhere out there, new ships patrolled the borders. New officers trained in combined tactics. The galaxy had learned from one desperate battle. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had not needed to. They had simply proven they belonged, not by being like everyone else, but by being themselves. And that had made all the difference. 10 years after the Battle of Kepler's Edge, peace held across the Coalition. The Vorath Empire remained a powerful neighbor, but they chose diplomacy over war. Young Vorath officers sometimes studied at human academies, learning the tactics that had defeated their empire. It was strange and uncomfortable, but it was better than endless war. In the shipyards above Earth, more vessels were being built. They carried names like Indomitable II, Unconquerable, and Unbreakable. Each one was different from the others, each one designed for specific threats and missions. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Diversity was strength. Different approaches were valuable. And sometimes the most powerful weapon was the one nobody expected. 250 Vorath warships formed a wall of metal and firepower between the asteroid field and open space. They had stopped chasing. They had stopped hunting. Now they simply waited, knowing the Indomitable would have to come to them or hide forever. Park Hyun stood on the bridge looking at the tactical display. The numbers were impossible. Even if every shot found its target, even if everything went perfectly, they could not win, not in any traditional sense of the word. But Park Hyun had stopped thinking traditionally 3 days ago. Mireille, what's our status? He asked. Kim Mireille's voice came through from engineering. The reactor is stable, but we've been pushing it hard. I can give you one more burst of maximum power, one more chance to go faster than they expect. After that, we're going to need to shut down for repairs or the whole thing will melt. Ammunition? Namsora answered. Enough for maybe 2 engagements. 3 if we're very careful. We have 1 nuclear missile left. I've been saving it for something special. Park Hyun turned to his communications officer. Jiwoo, that virus you planted in their network during the last battle. Can we use it again? Han Jiwoo smiled. It was not a nice smile. It's already in their systems. They never even knew it was there. I can't shut them down again, but I can do something almost as good. I can introduce a delay in their targeting coordination. Just a fraction of a second, but at combat speeds it might be enough. How much time do I have? Maybe 30 seconds before they isolate it and purge it from their network. Park Hyun nodded slowly. A plan was forming in his mind. It was reckless and dangerous and would probably get them all killed. but staying here would definitely get them killed. At least this way they would die fighting. He sat in the captain's chair and opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. What we're about to do is insane. We're going to charge directly at the Vorath fleet. We're going to get as close as we can to their flagship. We're going to make them remember that humans don't surrender, even when we should. It has been an honor serving with you. In the coalition capital, President Kang Minho stood before the Galactic Council. He was 67 years old and had spent 40 years in politics. He had always been diplomatic, always careful with his words. Not today. For 150 years, he said, humanity has tried to be like you. We adopted your technology. We learned your ways. We abandoned our own methods because we thought they were primitive. Today, one ship has reminded us why that was a mistake. The Indomitable was built by humans for humans using human thinking, and it has done what no one thought possible. Whatever happens in the next hour, remember this. We don't need to be like you to stand beside you. We just need to be ourselves. The council chamber was silent. Every species watched the data feeds from the Kepler sector. On the Indomitable, the crew prepared for the final battle. In the engine room, a young woman worked alongside Kim Mirai. Her name was Park Jisoo, and she was 23 years old. She was also Captain Park Hyun's daughter. She had volunteered for the mission without telling her father. He had discovered her presence on the second day but said nothing. Now, with death approaching, she worked beside the chief engineer with steady hands. Can we really do this? Jisoo asked quietly. Kim Mirai smiled. Your father is either a genius or completely insane. Maybe both. But if anyone can pull this off, it's him. On the bridge, Park Hyun gave the order. All ahead full. Plot a course straight through the center of their formation. Target, the Dominance Eternal. Ko Jin-woo's hands moved across the controls. The Indomitable burst from the asteroid field at maximum acceleration. It did not try to evade. It did not try to hide. It simply charged directly at the enemy fleet like an ancient warrior. The Vorath fleet opened fire. Hundreds of energy weapons created a wall of deadly light. Any normal ship would have been vaporized in seconds. But the Indomitable had no shields to fail. It had 2 meters of composite armor that could absorb punishment that would destroy more elegant designs. The ship shook as energy beams struck the hull. Armor melted and vaporized, but the ship kept coming. Ko Jin-woo flew like a man possessed, weaving through the fire in a pattern that seemed random but was carefully calculated. Every move was designed to make the Vorath targeting computers guess wrong. Jiwoo now, Park Hyun shouted. Han Jiwoo activated her virus. Throughout the Vorath fleet, targeting systems suddenly had a tiny delay. Ships tried to coordinate their fire, but their shots arrived a fraction of a second late. In space combat, that might as well be an hour. The Indomitable plunged into the Vorath formation. At this range, modern tactics meant nothing. The ships were too close together. If the Vorath fired their heavy weapons, they would hit their own vessels. Namsora fired continuously. Railguns at 200 meters were devastating. Missiles launched at point-blank range could not miss. The Indomitable was not trying to destroy the fleet. It was trying to break their spirit, and it was working. Vorath ships scattered, trying to avoid the human vessel that fought like a cornered animal. Confusion spread through their ranks. Target ahead, Ko Jin-woo reported. The Dominance Eternal. The Vorath flagship loomed before them, massive and powerful. On its bridge, Vex Morath had finally realized the depth of his mistake. He had treated the humans as insects. He had underestimated them. And now this ancient ship was about to ram his flagship. All weapons, destroy that ship, he screamed. War Master Krell Vaston stepped forward. Commander, you'll hit our own vessels. Let me coordinate. You're relieved, Vex Morath shouted. I will not be defeated by primitives. The moment of confusion on the Vorath bridge was exactly what Park Hyun needed. Jisoo, I need everything the reactor has, he said, using his daughter's first name for the first time. In the engine room, Park Jisoo understood. Her father had always known she was there. Tears streamed down her face as she pushed the reactor to 150% capacity. Daeho, our last missile. Make it count. Choi Daeho armed the final nuclear warhead. Target locked. The Dominance Eternal's reactor section. Sora, 1 railgun shot. Maximum power. Namsora targeted the same point. Ready, Captain. Fire. The railgun slug launched first, moving faster than the Vorath could track. It struck the flagship's hull and punched through, creating a breach. 1 second later, the nuclear missile flew through that breach and detonated inside the ship. The Dominance Eternal broke apart. The explosion was visible across the entire sector. The Vorath fleet stopped. Their flagship was gone. Their commander was dead. And one small human ship had done it all. On the Indomitable, alarms screamed. The reactor was failing. Hull breaches were appearing throughout the ship. They had seconds before complete system failure. All hands abandon ship, Park Hyun ordered. Get to the escape pods, now! The crew fled to the pods. Park Hyun remained on the bridge until the last person was away. Then he too entered a pod and ejected into space. Behind him the Indomitable drifted, dark and dying. But it had done what it needed to do. The Vorath 7th Armada began to retreat. The asteroid field known as Kepler's Edge was a graveyard of ancient rock and ice. Thousands of asteroids drifted through space in chaotic patterns, ranging from small boulders to mountains of stone. Most ships avoided the area because navigation was dangerous and sensors became unreliable. Among all the debris, the Indomitable entered the field at full speed with 50 Vorath warships in pursuit. Navigator Ko Jin-woo sat at the helm, his hand steady on the controls. He was 31 years old and had grown up playing spaceflight simulators. Now he flew a real warship through a deadly maze of rock. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands never shook. Reading multiple contacts behind us, Han Ji-woo reported. The Vorath fleet is splitting into hunting groups. 5 ships per group. They're trying to surround us. Park Hyun studied the tactical display. The Vorath were using smart tactics now, not just rushing forward. They would spread out, flush the Indomitable out of hiding, and destroy it with concentrated fire. It was a good plan. It would probably work, unless he changed the rules. The Vorath use energy sensors to track ships, Kim Mirai said from engineering. They look for reactor heat, shield emissions, weapons charging. We can reduce our signature by shutting down non-essential systems. Do it, Park Hyun ordered. Make us a ghost. The Indomitable went dark. Only essential systems remained active. The ship still moved, but on minimal power. To the Vorath sensors optimized for detecting modern ships, it became nearly invisible among all the metal-rich asteroids. The first group of Vorath ships passed within 2 kilometers, searching for their prey. They never saw the Indomitable hiding in the shadow of a large asteroid. Weapons range, Choi Dae-ho whispered. Fire, Park Hyun said quietly. The railguns spoke. At this range, less than 2 kilometers, even Vorath shields could not protect against the solid slugs. 2 ships exploded immediately. A third was crippled. The remaining 2 turned to face their attacker, but the Indomitable was already moving, disappearing behind another cluster of rocks. The pattern repeated across the asteroid field. The Indomitable would hide, wait for a group to pass, strike hard, and vanish. It was not the warfare of grand fleet battles. It was ambush and murder, the tactics of ancient submarine commanders translated to space. Chief Weapons Officer Nam Sora managed the weapons with expert precision. She was 44 and had trained on old systems before the coalition standardized everything. Every shot counted because ammunition was limited. Every shot she fired found its target. After 2 hours, 15 Vorath ships had been destroyed or disabled. The hunters were becoming the hunted, and they knew it. On the Dominance Eternal, War Master Krell Vastin took direct command of the tactical situation. Vex Morath watched in sullen silence as his second-in-command coordinated the fleet. The human ship is using the asteroids for cover and striking from ambush, Krell explained to his officers. We cannot track it with our standard sensors, so we will change tactics. We will not hunt it, we will trap it. He ordered the Vorath ships to form a moving net, slowly pushing through the asteroid field. Any gap that the Indomitable tried to use for escape would be covered by multiple ships. It was slower than hunting, but it was safer. Eventually, they would force the human ship into the open. Park Hyun saw the trap developing on his tactical display. Han Ji-woo had been monitoring Vorath communications, and the pattern was clear. They were being herded toward an area with fewer asteroids, a place where they could not hide. They're learning, he said to his officers. They adapted faster than I hoped. We can still break through, Choi Dae-ho suggested. Pick the weakest point in their formation and punch through at maximum speed. That's what they expect, Park Hyun said. He looked at Han Ji-woo. Their ships are networked together, sharing tactical data. That's how they coordinate so well. Can you disrupt that network? Han Ji-woo thought for a moment, her fingers already working across her console. I can try an electromagnetic pulse. It's old technology, very inefficient. Modern ships don't use it because it takes too much power for too little effect. But the Vorath ships are linked together, Kim Mirai said, understanding. If we hit them with an EMP at close range, it might cascade through their network. Exactly, Park Hyun said. But we need to get close, very close. Ko Jinwoo turned in his chair. Captain, you're suggesting we fly into their trap? I'm suggesting we spring it on our terms, Park Hyun replied. He outlined his plan. The officers stared at him in silence. Then Namsora laughed. That's insane. Completely insane. When do we start? The Indomitable emerged from the asteroids at maximum acceleration, heading straight for the gap in the Vorath formation. It looked like a desperate escape attempt. The Vorath ships moved to close the trap, converging on the human vessel from 3 sides. They're taking the bait, Han Ji-woo reported. All ships moving to intercept. Ji-woo charged the EMP, Park Hyun ordered. Mirai, I need every bit of power you can give me. Go get ready for the craziest flying you've ever done. The Vorath ships closed in, their weapons charging. They were seconds from firing. The Indomitable appeared caught with nowhere to run. Then Ko Jinwoo proved why he was the best pilot in Earth's fleet. The Indomitable twisted in space, its engines firing in patterns that should have torn the ship apart. It accelerated not away from the trap but toward it, diving between 2 Vorath cruisers at a distance of less than 50 meters. The Vorath tried to target it, but their computers could not track such an insane maneuver. The ships risked hitting each other if they fired. At the center of the formation, Han Ji-woo triggered the EMP. A massive electromagnetic pulse exploded outward, invisible but devastating. The Indomitable's old systems, shielded and hardened for exactly this kind of warfare, barely flickered. The Vorath systems, linked together for efficient coordination, crashed spectacularly. For 17 seconds, the Vorath ships lost their tactical network. Their weapons went offline. Their shields fluctuated. Their coordination vanished. 17 seconds was all Namsora needed. The Indomitable fired every weapon it had. Railguns, missiles, kinetic batteries. The Vorath ships, blind and unshielded, were sitting targets. 8 ships died in those 17 seconds. More were crippled. The perfect trap became a massacre. The Indomitable burst out of the formation and back into the asteroid field. Behind it, the Vorath fleet descended into chaos as ships tried to restore their systems and avoid colliding with each other. On the bridge, the crew was silent. They had survived again, but the cost was becoming clear. Damage alarms were sounding throughout the ship. Ammunition was down to 40%. The reactor was running hot from the massive power demands. Kim Mirai's voice was tight when she reported. Captain, we can maybe do that 2 more times. After that, we're out of tricks. Park Hyun nodded slowly. He had known this was not sustainable. They had hurt the Vorath badly, but the enemy still had over 200 ships. Eventually, numbers would win. But they had proven something important. They had shown that humans could fight back. They had shown that old methods still worked. They had shown that one ship, crewed by people who refused to surrender, could defy an empire. Han Ji-woo interrupted his thoughts. Captain, the Vorath are regrouping. All of them. I mean all of them. The entire Armada is forming up. Park Hyun brought up the tactical display. Every Vorath ship was converging on a single point. They were done playing games. They were bringing overwhelming force to bear, and they were heading straight for the Indomitable. The Vorath 7th Armada entered the Kepler sector like a storm of metal and fire. 300 warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. At the center of the fleet, the flagship Dominance Eternal was twice the size of any other vessel. On its bridge stood Fleet Commander Vex Morath, a being who had conquered 12 systems and never known defeat. Vex Morath looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. The coalition forces had fled like frightened animals. Only a handful of small patrol ships remained, and they were retreating quickly. This would not even qualify as a real battle. It would be a simple extermination of the last few pests. Commander, we detect one unknown vessel, his tactical officer reported. Human design, very old. It appears to be a museum piece, Vex Morath laughed. The sound echoed through the bridge. The humans send us an antique? How desperate they must be. He turned to his second-in-command, War Master Krell Vastan. What do you think of this gesture? Krell Vastan was older and more careful than his commander. He had fought in many wars and learned that any enemy could be dangerous if underestimated. He studied the data on the human ship carefully. The vessel has no energy shields, Krell said slowly. Its weapons do not match any known energy signature. It is small but heavily armored. I recommend caution. Caution? Vex-Morath's amusement grew. Against one primitive ship? No, my friend. We will make an example of them. Send 5 cruisers to destroy it. The rest of the fleet will watch and learn what happens to those who resist the Vorath Empire. Far across the sector, aboard the Coalition observation ship Morning Star, Dr. Yun Sangwoo watched his instruments with intense focus. He was 52 years old and had spent his life studying military technology across different species. Right now he was more interested than he had been in years. The Vorath are sending only 5 ships, he said to his assistant. They are not taking the Indomitable seriously. Should they? His assistant asked. It's 80 years old, Dr. Yun smiled. Old does not mean weak. It just means different. I think we are about to see something very interesting. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Park Hyun watched the 5 Vorath cruisers approach. Each one was larger than his ship. Each one had energy shields and powerful weapons. Any one of them could destroy a normal human patrol vessel in seconds, but the Indomitable was not a normal vessel. Weapons status? Park Hyun asked calmly. Choi Dae-ho checked his displays. All railguns loaded and ready. Nuclear missiles armed. Kinetic batteries at full capacity. Electronic warfare systems prepared. Engineering. Kim Mire's voice came through clearly. Reactor at optimal power. Engines ready for maximum acceleration. Armor integrity at 100%. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Han Ji-woo spoke from her station. Captain, the Vorath are broadcasting surrender demands. They're being transmitted on 17 different frequencies. Ignore them, Park Hyun said. He opened his own communication channel. This is Captain Park Hyun of the United Human Naval Ship Indomitable. You are in violation of Coalition space. Turn back or be destroyed. The response came quickly. The Vorath commander's voice was filled with mockery. Primitive humans in their ancient vessel. We shall add you to our collection of Fire everything, Park Hyun ordered. The Indomitable unleashed hell. 20 railgun slugs launched simultaneously, each one accelerating to 2% of light speed. They were solid metal, dumb and primitive by modern standards, but they moved so fast that they became invisible streaks of death. The Vorath cruisers activated their energy shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and slow down physical projectiles. The railgun slugs passed through the shields as if they did not exist. The shields were calibrated for objects moving at normal speeds, not for solid metal traveling at relativistic velocities. 3 cruisers were struck before they could react. The slugs punched through their hulls like paper, creating massive internal damage. Explosions blossomed from the impact points. The Indomitable's missiles launched next. 16 nuclear-tipped warheads, each one carrying destructive power that the galaxy had not seen in combat for a century. The Vorath point defense systems tried to intercept them, but the systems were designed for modern smart missiles. These old weapons flew on simple ballistic trajectories that confused the targeting computers. 2 missiles reached their targets. The nuclear explosions in space were silent but devastating. One Vorath cruiser simply ceased to exist. Another was crippled, its hull torn open and systems failing. The final Vorath cruiser tried to retreat. Choi Dae-ho targeted it with the kinetic batteries. Thousands of small projectiles, simple metal balls accelerated by magnetic rails. They shredded the cruiser's engines and left it drifting helplessly in space. 45 seconds. 5 Vorath cruisers destroyed or disabled in 45 seconds. On the Dominance Eternal, silence filled the bridge. Vex-Morath stared at the tactical display, unable to process what he had just witnessed. 5 of his cruisers gone, destroyed by weapons that should not have worked, defeated by tactics that should have been obsolete. Impossible, he whispered. Krell Vastin's voice was steady but firm. Commander, I recommend we withdraw and reassess. The human ship is more dangerous than we thought. No. Vex-Morath's voice rose to a shout. It is one ship. One old primitive ship. I will not be humiliated by these insects. He turned to his fleet commanders. Send 50 warships. Crush them. Destroy them completely. I want nothing left but debris. Krell Vastin wanted to argue but held his silence. He had served long enough to know when a commander was beyond reason. Instead, he began studying the data from the destroyed cruisers. There was something about the human ship's tactics that seemed familiar, as if he had read about them somewhere long ago. Across the sector, every coalition ship had stopped retreating. They were watching their sensors in disbelief. Admiral Lee Suman stood on her flagship's bridge with tears in her eyes. For the first time in 150 years, humanity had struck back at a superior enemy and won. "Record everything," she ordered. "Every scan, every reading, every second of that battle. The galaxy needs to see this." Dr. Yoon Sang-woo was broadcasting his analysis across all coalition frequencies. "This changes everything." The human vessel used kinetic weapons against energy shields. The shields are designed for energy absorption and deflection, not for solid matter at extreme velocities. It's brilliant. It's simple, and we all forgot about it because we thought newer was always better. On the Indomitable, Park Hyun allowed himself a small smile. His crew was cheering, embracing each other. They had survived. More than that, they had won. But the smile faded as Han Ji-woo gave her next report. "Captain, sensors show 50 Vorath warships breaking formation and heading toward us. They're coming at full speed." Park Hyun nodded. He had expected this. The first strike had worked because of surprise. Now the enemy was angry and coming in force. This was where the real battle would begin. "Helm, set course for the asteroid field," he ordered. "We're going to make them work for this kill." The bridge of the patrol ship fell silent when the message arrived. Captain Park Hyun read it twice, then a third time, hoping the words would somehow change. They did not. The Vorath Empire had declared war on the Galactic Coalition. The message was clear and brutal in its simplicity. Surrender the Kepler sector within 7 days, or face complete destruction. Park Hyun was 42 years old and had spent 20 years in Earth's defense fleet. He had seen many things, but he had never seen anything like this. The Vorath Empire controlled half the known galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead of most species. Their warships were massive and powerful. Against them, the coalition was like a child facing an adult. The orders came quickly after the declaration. All coalition forces would evacuate the Kepler sector. Humanity's small fleet would cover the retreat. It was a polite way of saying they would stay behind to die while others escaped. Park Hyun understood this perfectly. So did his crew. Commander Kim Mirai sat at the engineering station, her fingers moving across the controls. She was 38 and had gray hair that she never bothered to dye. She preferred old machines to new ones, often saying that humans had forgotten how to build things properly. Most people thought she was strange. Park Hyun thought she was brilliant. Lieutenant Choi Dae-ho stood at the weapons station. At 29, he was young and eager. His family had served in the military for 5 generations. He wanted to prove that humans could fight as well as any alien species. Today might give him that chance, though perhaps not in the way he hoped. Specialist Han Ji-woo monitored the communications. She was only 25 but had a gift for understanding patterns and data. Right now she was tracking evacuation ships as they fled the sector. Her young face was tight with concentration. "Captain," Han Ji-woo said suddenly, "I'm picking up a signal. It's old, very old, an automated distress beacon." Park Hyun frowned. "Where?" "Titan, the moon near Saturn." She looked puzzled. "It's coming from the old shipyards, but those were shut down 80 years ago." Park Hyun remembered learning about those shipyards in Academy. They had been built during humanity's early expansion into space, before first contact with alien species. After humans joined the coalition, they had been encouraged to abandon their primitive technology and adopt standardized alien designs. The old yards had been sealed and forgotten. "Can you identify the source?" Park Hyun asked. Han Ji-woo worked her controls for several minutes. "It's a ship, Captain. A big one. The computer says it's the UHNS Indomitable, but that doesn't make sense. That ship was never completed." Kim Mirai's head snapped up. "The Indomitable? That was the prototype warship. The last ship designed with pure human technology before we joined the coalition. Why would it have power after 80 years? Choi Dae-ho asked. "It wouldn't," Kim Mirai said slowly, "unless it was in full standby mode. Unless someone wanted to preserve it completely." Her eyes gleamed with sudden interest. "Captain, we should investigate." Park Hyun knew he should ignore the signal. They had orders to patrol for evacuation ships, but something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was desperation. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the simple fact that they were going to die anyway, so what difference did a small detour make? "Set course for Titan," he ordered. The shipyards floated in orbit around Saturn's largest moon. They were dark and silent, covered in 80 years of space dust. The patrol ship docked carefully with the main facility. Park Hyun took a team inside, including Kim Mirai and Choi Dae-ho. The interior was cold and dark. Their suit lights cut through the blackness as they moved through corridors. Everything was preserved perfectly in the vacuum. They found the central bay after 20 minutes of searching. The ship hung in the darkness like a sleeping giant. It was smaller than modern coalition warships, but somehow looked more solid, more real. The hull was thick gray metal instead of the smooth, energy-resistant materials used on newer ships. Weapons bristled from every surface. The design was aggressive and brutal. Beautiful, Kim Mirai whispered. They found the airlock and forced it open. Inside, emergency power still functioned. Lights flickered on as they moved through the corridors. Everything was clean and maintained, as if the crew had just left yesterday. On the bridge, Kim Mirai activated the main computer. It took several minutes to wake up, then a cool voice spoke. Yuchin's indomitable prototype heavy warship. Status standby mode. Awaiting orders. Park Hyun sat in the captain's chair. It felt right somehow. Computer, show me your specifications. What he saw made his breath catch. The Indomitable was armed with weapons that the Coalition had banned decades ago as too primitive. Railguns that fired solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. Nuclear missiles. Kinetic cannons. Not a single energy weapon on the entire ship. The propulsion system was strange too. A hybrid design mixing fusion and antimatter that no one used anymore. The aliens had said it was inefficient. But the power reading showed it could accelerate faster than any ship Park Hyun had ever seen. There were no energy shields. Instead, the hull was layered with composite armor nearly 2 meters thick. Modern ships had armor a few centimeters thick at most, relying on shields for protection. This ship was designed for a different kind of war, Kim Mirai said quietly. She was reading through the tactical database. Look at this. Every system assumes we would be fighting enemies with better technology. The entire design is built around that idea. Choi Dae-ho found something else. Carved into the metal wall beside the captain's chair were words. Hit first, hit hard, and never stop moving. Park Hyun made a decision that would change everything. He opened a communication channel to Admiral Lee Suman, the commander of Earth's defense fleet. She was 60 years old and had spent her entire career fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. Admiral, I need to request something unusual, Park Hyun said. He explained about the Indomitable. There was a long silence. Then Admiral Lee spoke. The Coalition Command will think you're insane. So do I. But we're about to abandon an entire sector to an enemy that considers us insects. Maybe insanity is what we need. You have 72 hours to make that ship operational. After that, you're on your own. The next 3 days were chaos. Kim Mirai worked miracles bringing systems online. The old human engineering was different from modern designs, but it was solid and reliable. Systems that had slept for 80 years woke up one by one. Han Jiwoo discovered that the ship's artificial intelligence was intact and fully functional. It had spent 8 decades dreaming of war, refining tactics, preparing for a battle that never came. Volunteers arrived from other human ships. Engineers who were curious about old technology, weapons officers who wanted to learn about kinetic warfare, young crew members who were tired of running and wanted to fight. On the 3rd day, the Indomitable powered up fully for the first time in 80 years. The lights blazed. The engines hummed. The weapons systems armed themselves. Park Hyun sat in the captain's chair and looked at his crew. They were ready. The ship was ready. In 2 days, the Vorath Empire would arrive with 300 warships. Humanity had one old prototype that everyone had forgotten about. It was time to remind the galaxy what humans could do.